Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for The Walking Dead Season 6, Episode 13, The Same Boat. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of The Walking Dead, so I have to give a spoiler warning for The Walking Dead up to Season 6, Episode 13. If you haven't seen up to this point, you may not want to watch this video, otherwise some things will be spoiled for you. So, let me be completely frank, I found this episode overall to be a big disappointment after last week's episode, which ended on a mega suspenseful, super exciting scene and this great cliffhanger. I was expecting an even greater thrill ride, but instead, what we got was another boring, talky Walking Dead episode where people once again debate the morals of killing and what it takes to survive in the post-apocalyptic world. Perhaps I might have found such philosophical discussions interesting if I hadn't seen it on this show a million times already! That being said, this episode wasn't completely horrible. There was a bit of suspense in this episode and there were some things I liked, but overall this is the typical Walking Dead that made me think this show was average in the first place. It was cool the way the episode began with seeing through Maggie and Carol's perspective, and it was cool that the entire episode continued that way, where we just saw things from Maggie and Carol's perspective. It made the episode a bit more tense because you had no idea what Rick and the gang were up to, so it really put you in Maggie and Carol's mindset. That being said, there are so many characters in the show, I never find it that interesting when they hyper-focus on one or two characters for an entire episode. It kind of reminds me of the second half of Season 4, which I found really boring. And the worst thing is that we spend most of the episode meeting these characters who didn't even survive to the end. Feels kind of like a waste of time. I was kind of expecting Pauline to survive and Rick and the gang to take her prisoner, so we get this interesting reversal of fortune storyline, but instead they kill her off. They kill off all the minor characters in one episode. Gee, I've never seen The Walking Dead do that before. That being said, I get what they were going for with Pauline, as she was meant to be a parallel to Carol, almost a mirror for her to look in and to not be too happy with who she's become. And overall, this episode seemed to dance across the moral gray area and make you wonder who really are the good guys and the bad guys, because some of these saviors were made quite relatable, particularly the character who had her finger cut off. You almost sympathized for her, and it made me wonder if Rick and the gang were going to assimilate some of these people into their group, but apparently not. Now I have to talk about Carol and how I was totally unhappy about her portrayal in this episode. At first I thought she was totally putting on an act, but then we get to the end of the episode, we see she's still behaving that way and wanting to set Pauline free and not kill people. I mean, there is an argument to be made that she was putting on an act, but even so, she wasn't exaggerating too much, as we see at the end of the episode. It's pretty apparent that Morgan got to her. Now, we saw a bit of this last week as she was agonizing over the list of people that she killed. However, I think they took it a bridge too far in this episode. She should have reverted back to her total kick-ass mode in this episode and perhaps regret it afterwards. And again, maybe she did to an extent, but still she had this "oh no, we can't kill" attitude, and it's not at all the Carol that we know and love. So I stand by my statement that there's a good chance that she doesn't survive the end of the season, but we'll see. It was also interesting how Maggie turned into a total cold-hearted killer at the end of this episode. I sense that she's going to be a bit traumatized by the events of this episode later on, but we'll see. So what I find a bit more interesting is where things are going to go from here. The way they ended it with Rick and the crew thinking that they killed all the saviors, and how they said, you know, we're all Negan, and that one guy they took prisoner claimed to be Negan, when clearly he isn't, but I feel that Rick thinks that he is. So at first, Rick and the gang had the advantage because the Saviors didn't know they existed. But now the Saviors have the advantage because not only do they now know that they exist, but now Rick and the gang think that the Saviors are all dead, which clearly is not the case. And from what I gather, Hilltop was only aware of that one compound from the Saviors, and so they probably think that the Saviors are all dead as well, and I think it's possible they may find out first just how wrong they are. So my prediction, not having read the comics mind you, is that the next 2 episodes will be slow-paced character episodes where not much happens. But in the finale, Negan will show up at Alexandria with a bunch of Saviors holding Tara and Heath captive, and Negan will then beat Tara to death. That's just my guess. I could be totally wrong, but we'll see. The other theory I had that's not related to this episode is that we see Morgan building another cell in the previous episode, and we even get a glimpse of that prison cell in the trailer for the next episode. Most people assume he was building it for the Saviors, but what if he wasn't? What if he was building it for Rick, and he throws Rick in the cell? That would be quite interesting, and I could see that happening. Also, I'm sticking by my prediction that either Glenn or Maggie will die before the season's end, but we'll see. So my rating for The Same Boat out of 10 is a 5 average. There were some good parts with the tension of not knowing how Maggie and Carol were going to get out of there, and that was raised by the fact that we didn't know what Rick and the gang were up to. But yeah, I'm sorry, but The Walking Dead doesn't typically handle these talky character stories very well, and I felt this story was just a rehash of the same thing that we've seen a billion times on this show already, so I wasn't overly impressed. So that's it for my review of The Same Boat. Be sure to check back here every week as I review episodes of The Walking Dead, and be sure to check out my channel for many other videos on shows like Game of Thrones, Star Trek, Better Call Saul, Vikings, House of Cards, and more. And be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.